Hello, welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome to another week of the show. We're here on Monday, March 27th. I am your host today, Jeffrey Bazzi, alongside my co-host, Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how was the weekend? And I don't know, what's on tap for this week? How are you feeling overall?
Well, we had a pretty good sports weekend, in my opinion. Obviously, the March Madness games I thought were flawless, and we now have a Final Four that consists of FAU, San Diego State, and then Miami and UConn. And to say that is surprising would be the least of it, right? I don't think anybody saw FAU making the Final Four, especially as a 9 seed, although we kind of have agreed they are pretty criminally underseeded. And as for those other matchups too, and the other teams who have made it, I mean, San Diego State, that's a very big surprise when you consider the track record the Mountain West had. And I feel like this is the first time in a while that there is not like a 1 or 2 seed in the Final Four.
Yeah, I remember going into the Elite Eight, there were no 1 seeds in the Elite Eight, and that was the first time that's ever happened. But to not have a 1, 2, or 3 in there, that's crazy.
Yeah, of course, Texas was the last dime to fall amongst the 1 and 2 seeds yesterday to Miami in a game which they led in the second half.
Right, they were in control for most of the way, and then you saw Miami kind of just chip away. But yeah, it's definitely a very unconventional Final Four. I think no one would have predicted these 4 teams.
Yeah, absolutely not. I definitely think that is something that could be agreed upon. And I want to give a quick shout out to Florida Atlantic just because, you know, first of all, it's also with the fact that we have 2 mid-majors in there too. We got San Diego State, who's a mid-major, and Florida Atlantic, which is amazing in itself as well, because we usually get like 1, but this is kind of 2. But also Florida Atlantic, this has to be the first time we've ever heard of them really doing anything in terms of like athletic success. My
Yeah,
uncle went there, so obviously I've like followed it not closely, but I've known enough about it. And I can tell you that they really don't have much athletic success. With the exception of maybe their baseball program being pretty decent and when they had Lane Kiffin as the coach of their football team. But besides that, it's been very unsuccessful. So this is probably the biggest thing to ever happen in the history of FAU. So that's kind of cool as well.
yeah, I've always known them as a school, but I've never really heard of any athletic success, like you said. And the thing is, since they're playing San Diego State, one of those two is going to be in the final next Monday. So one of them is going to have a shot at the title, which is unbelievable.
And yeah, and what's crazy enough too is that we have 2 schools kind of close to each other because, you know, Florida Atlantic's in South Florida, and obviously University of Miami is not in Miami, but it's right next to it in Coral Gables. And it's just cool to have 2 schools from the same exact area, right? I mean, this is just kind of cool to
Yeah, they're
me.
pretty close to each
Yeah,
other.
so it's just kind of cool to see South Florida just, kind of go on this run in basketball. And, so I find it very, very cool. But there's a lot I want to talk about too, because we have a big Baltimore story that we need to talk about today.
Yes, we do. And the news was breaking in the last few hours, but Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, he said that he has requested a trade from the Ravens, and he actually tweeted out that he requested the trade back on March 2nd. And he said that the quote, the team has not been interested in meeting my value. So there's a lot to digest here because all this has been coming out today. And we've kind of wondered what Lamar is going to do because there's been some rumors about him getting a long-term deal, but those kind of fell through. And then we didn't really know what was going on. We haven't really heard much from Lamar the Ravens in a little while, but then this bombshell today.
Yeah, we got to set up this situation first because this has kind of been a long time in the making. Obviously, I think the relationship between Lamar, because he's negotiating his own contract. We need to remember Lamar does not have an agent, although he has the NFLPA uncertified agent, Ken Francis, who he says is his business partner. But I mean, mystery man Ken Francis is like the most interesting guy in this entire situation. But basically, the teams have to reach out directly to Lamar himself. And Lamar hasn't really been public about what he wants. Like, he has not specifically laid that out for anyone. There's no knowledge, there's no reports. he got a fully guaranteed deal. He didn't take it. Is it long-term stability he wants? I don't know. He hasn't came out and said that. This is literally the first kind of contact we've had from Lamar himself as far as like, a solution towards the situation, I'd say. And the funny thing about this is look at the timing of it. I don't know if you were aware what's going on when he did send out those tweets saying that he wanted to essentially be traded from the Ravens and he wanted to clear the air. But it was right as John Harbaugh was doing a press conference. It was literally at the exact same time that he was doing a press conference. And in the middle of the press conference, John Harbaugh was just getting asked about these. I have no idea if he knew that those tweets were coming or not, but obviously he was asked about them. And he said he has no reason to believe that Lamar Jackson will not be playing at least under the tag this year, but he has hopes that he'll be the quarterback, whether that's on the tag or that's, through reaching a long-term deal. But the thing is, I don't think Lamar, it looks like he wants to play for the Ravens. Like, I'm going to be honest. I feel like his mind is already made on, I want out and I'm done.
Yeah, I feel like this whole time the timing thing's been weird. Like you said, I wasn't aware that John Harbaugh had that press conference at the
Yeah,
time.
and that felt on purpose.
But the other thing I was going to bring up about timing was you remember that the Ravens placed the non-exclusive franchise tag on Lamar, and that was 5 days after Jackson said he requested the trade. So little did we know that while they put the tag on him, that he actually did request a trade at the time. And I think for the tag, if he signs a deal with another team, I think the Ravens can match the
They
deal.
can match it, and the other team, whoever it would be, would have to give up 2 first-round picks.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think 2 first-round picks for Lamar is honestly a good deal.
Okay.
I would honestly,
I'd probably want another one in there. I'd probably want 3. I mean, he's Lamar Jackson. Like,
it's 2
It's
because of this agreement. It's 2.
oof.
Like you're talking about from the Ravens' perspective. I'm talking about from a team who would be acquiring Lamar's perspective.
Okay, yeah. If I'm on the Ravens side of things, I don't know.
Yes, 2 feels like a little less, especially
It's
when
like
you
I want a little more
consider,
than that.
especially when you consider that Deshaun Watson went for 4. But at the same time, Lamar does have concerns, right? Like I don't know how much further you really could go beyond 2 first-round picks because we've already seen now 2 seasons in a row he can't finish the season due to injury. You also have to consider the fact that nobody knows what he wants. He doesn't have an agent, so you have to reach out to him directly, which is a mess in its own right. And then you also have to consider the fact that whatever team that he goes to is going to kind of have to change their entire offense, right? Because it's going to become a lot more running based and running focused because Lamar's kind of at his best when he's able to, have the option to run and pass or have like an RPO or just a read option. Basically putting him in a situation where he can do both is what makes him best because he's allowed to use all his skill set. And you're going to have to kind of change your offense, though, because think about it. The Ravens had to change theirs for Lamar just to put him in a position to succeed. But that's just coaching in general. So I'm not like saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying it's something that has to be considered because more than likely, if you look at like just the Ravens' history of their offense since they've had Lamar, they've always been more of a running team than a passing team.
Right. And they've always been a running team. I feel like even before we got there, that's kind of just how they've been.
But if you look at their record since the time that they got him, when they rush for like over 100 yards, they're like so much better.
Yeah. I mean, since he's been there, they've been a perennial playoff team. Now, have they gone any farther than that? Not really.
And also, that's a good point, Jeff, too, because Lamar really hasn't succeeded in the playoffs.
He only has 1 playoff win.
Yeah, and he's been there 3 times.
Right. And the one year, I think it was in 2019, they had the best record in the AFC and they lost their home game in the divisional round.
They did. They lost to the Tennessee Titans.
Right.
And then they ended up losing to the Bills in the divisional round after beating the Titans the year after.
Right. And then this past year, he didn't play in the game because of injury, but they lost the Bengals.
Well, there was also the Chargers game when he stepped in for Flacco in the middle of the season too, because that was his first ever playoff game.
Right.
And remember, that was a home playoff game, and they ended up losing that one as well. So the track record for playoff success with Lamar is not great. So that's another concern. So Not that Deshaun Watson didn't have concerns for himself, and he still got four first round picks in return. So I agree with you. From the Ravens perspective, it seems like more than 2 first round picks would kind of be the ideal value, but they're setting themselves up this way because that's the tender that they put out there.
Right.
The franchise tender. That's
Well,
officially
and
what it's
now
called.
moving forward, I'm just trying to think of a hypothetical scenario where he does leave the Ravens. I'm
Yeah,
just
like
trying to think, where
what
does he
teams are
go?
interested, right? So, all right. So who's the? I would assume that they would try and look in the NFC before the AFC.
Yeah,
But if you look at the NFC teams who realistically seem like the most interested, or seem like they could be the
and
most,
I'm also just thinking of teams that just need a quarterback in
yeah.
general. And the first one that comes to my mind is the Commanders,
Okay, I had the Falcons.
the Falcons.
Yeah, I think the Falcons would be really good with him, just because they already have a solid running back in Tyler Algier, and they also have Cordero Patterson. So I feel like that could really work with Lamar's style of running. And I think good offensive coach in Arthur
They also
Smith.
have Drake London too,
And they have
who's
Drake
gonna be in
London.
his second season.
And they have Kyle Pitts, who's a good tight end. And we've seen Lamar.
A nice little young core there on offense.
Yeah, on offense. And combine that with Arthur Smith, I think doing a pretty decent job for what he's had. I think there's a potential that Lamar could go to the Falcons
I
and
could
have
see
some
it.
success.
The
But
interesting
I
thing
agree
is
with
too,
you about the Commanders. I'm interested to hear why you think the Commanders, though.
well, they were just the first team that popped my mind that needs a QB, and I think already having McLaurin there helps. I think they could use some other help too offensively. I think they need a little more firepower, but I feel like they're closer to winning than the Falcons are, just because it's close though.
I don't know if I'm going to be honest.
They're kind of on the same tier. I just think the Commanders are slightly better. Like
In terms of quality of team, sure. But I think if you stick Lamar Jackson on the Falcons,
the potential's way higher,
not just the potential's way higher, they're the front runners in that division.
no doubt.
Whereas if you add Lamar Jackson to the Commanders,
You could still get last place.
You could still get last place, and I don't think they're better than the Eagles or Cowboys with them on any.
Or maybe even the Giants.
Yeah, no, Giants is debatable.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the Giants D line versus the Washington O line, it was kind of the advantage Giants.
Right.
So, and we've seen the Giants actually be able to stop Lamar in the past. They actually had a really good game against him, which is ironic because their coach used to coach for the Ravens. So there's definitely some concern there for Washington because you're going to be giving up 2 first-round picks, right? So you're going to kind of take a step back in that, right? Because you're not going to be able to develop as many players, especially with the high talent in the first round, but you're going to have to look elsewhere. And it just gets so much more challenging in the NFL draft as you kind of go along, I think.
Yeah.
But also, let's think about this from the Ravens perspective too, right? So I agree with you, but they probably want to trade NFC. But let's think about the AFC teams who could potentially be interested. The first one that comes to my mind in the AFC, and I know this is going to sound a little crazy, but I could actually see it working. And we talked about this not that long ago. It's the Patriots.
Okay. I was thinking that
they kind of need an impact player at quarterback. They've been seeking that. They're a team that doesn't really have that great of receivers, but you know what? They do have decent of tight ends, which is the position that Lamar has had the most success throwing to.
Yeah, especially because they just picked up Gesicki from the Dolphins.
And him and Ramondre Stevenson wouldn't be the worst combination.
And they did sign Juju Smith-Schuster as another weapon.
Yeah, but again, still would kind of be similar to the Ravens' problems of he still doesn't have a good wide receiver. That he would still have that problem. Whereas in Washington, I guess you could make the case like an elite receiver.
Yeah, McLaurin's pretty good.
Yeah, McLaurin is about as good as Lamar's going to get, I would think.
Yeah, I don't think Juju's too far off.
I don't think he's in anywhere near this conversation of of Terry McLaurin at all.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
and he also just had
early in his career, maybe.
Well, listen, Juju as the primary target has never as a receiver has really never had a great season. His best season was when he played alongside Antonio Brown.
Yeah, he's a really good number 2.
Yeah.
If you put him next to DeAndre Hopkins or Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, but you're going to need someone elite, I think, next to him. And also, too, he kind of had this. I thought he looked decent in the playoffs, But you got to remember too, he's playing with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, this is going to be a guy who's one of the best to ever do it. So the wide receiver concerns are still there for the Patriots. But also another team that I've seen kind of just thrown out there has been the Lions. And I don't really get that because
Okay.
I would stick with Jared Goff. But another AFC team, and I think this is the team that by far makes probably the best sense that I haven't mentioned yet, besides the Falcons and the Commanders, and that's the Colts.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the Colts. I've seen them kind of in this conversation.
So they have a high pick, right? They have the 4th overall pick. And the rumor is that they're going to be interested in a quarterback. But think about this. If CJ Stroud goes 1, Bryce Young goes 2, where does that leave them? Do they like Anthony Richardson or Will Levis? I don't know. It's kind of debatable, right? They may not. They might actually feel more comfortable potentially moving up for one of those two. But at the same time, if you would move up for one of those two, what would it take? Maybe 2 firsts or more. Well, when you can just spend 2 firsts, you can now get Lamar Jackson. You just have to make sure that the Ravens are not going to have a chance, or it's not going to be an offer where they have a chance to match. Because that's the thing here. It's like Lamar is still under the contract franchise tender with the Ravens. Like he is a Raven for this year. For this year, they hold his rights. They can essentially control his destiny. His only leverage here is to say, I'm not playing for you and I will sit out. But look, who are the 3 players who have done that? The first is Melvin Gordon. He sat out for half the season. He came back. He wasn't really good when he came back. And then he ended up getting a deal, which was a lot more money than he deserved. So I guess it worked out for him. The second is Le'Veon Bell, but also he was kind of the same thing. Didn't have the impact, but still got the contract. And then the third is Deshaun Watson, who sat out for essentially 2 years?
Basically.
And a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So he
was also dealing with off the field issues too.
But still, he didn't play.
He did not play.
And the reason was because he didn't want to be in Houston. Yeah. Remember, that was a thing. That was a thing the year before.
He got his wish, and now he's in Cleveland.
Yeah, but the whole point is his production wasn't there, at least in the first 6 games, or the first 7 games, when he did eventually get back on the field. So I don't know if that's in Lamar's best interest to say, I'm sitting out.
Yeah. Going back to the teams we were talking about, the weird thing with the Falcons, and this was 3 weeks ago, so maybe it doesn't apply now, but they said they weren't even going to pursue Lamar. But now that he said this, I wonder if they're going to change their minds.
Yeah.
I feel like they would.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. Okay, so I look at the guys in the draft, and especially for those teams who are like in that like top 10, like the Colts and the Falcons. And here's another team too that I could see them. I don't know. I think this is interesting. The Texans, right? They have 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, it's just I feel like they're just so far at the bottom.
They are so far at the bottom.
The Lamar Jackson, and you're not really going to go too far. I mean,
here's the thing, though.
You go from like 3 wins to 6 wins.
You could make the case that the team surrounding like him on the Texans, at least offensively, isn't that much different than the Ravens, because the Texans do have some pieces on their O-line, right? They do have Laramie Tunsil. They've added some other nice players too. Like they do have a Mechie who's going to be coming back. They also have Damon Pierce, and that's potential. You could work with that, right? I mean, there's a chance Mechie would be better than any receiver that he's ever had.
It's true.
With the Ravens. And also, I think the running attack with Damon Pierce could be really good. Like there's potential there to grow. And they also signed Devin Singletary too. So they're definitely looking like a team that's thinking about, looking to attack on the ground. But at the same time too, it's like, and you got to remember, they have extra first-round picks from the Browns too.
From the trade.
So they have more of a plethora to make that kind of move. And it would be interesting because like I wonder if the Ravens would take the 2 Browns picks. I would imagine probably not. They probably would be like, no, we want the 2nd overall pick. But I don't know how it works. I'm not 100% sure if they could give the Browns picks, because I don't know if you have to give up your own. But if you're allowed to give up the Browns picks.
Yeah, I wonder if it's picks that are your picks or picks that you've acquired from other teams.
Exactly. And it's like,
guess if they're in your possession, I don't see why not you wouldn't be able to.
You give up the Browns this year because that's I think it's 11 or 12, and that's still a very high pick, and that would give the Ravens two first, and then it would all because you could also do a trade with the Texans pick next year. Say hypothetically, if you didn't want to give up number two, but they just have a lot more, I think, flexibility to make a move than some of these other teams.
I think so.
And I don't know. I'm interested to hear. Do you think there's anybody else really that could make a move for this besides those teams that we mentioned? I think the only other one would be the Jets, but it seems like they're locked and loaded on Rodgers. Doesn't seem like they're going to move off that path until they really have
Yeah,
to.
they said today that they're not going to really focus on trying to get Lamar Jackson. They're kind of just so fixated on the Rodgers.
It's also a cloud of uncertainty too going after Lamar because you have no idea how this is going to play out, and you might piss off Aaron Rodgers in the process.
Yeah, and then as far as other teams that could be interested, I don't really know. I mean, there are teams that we haven't named that probably, I don't know, could definitely upgrade a QB, but they're kind of stuck right now. I don't know. Like I almost said the Titans, but
I could see that. The problem is
they're kind of stuck.
Yeah, they're kind of stuck with their cap situation. They have Ryan Tannehill on the roster as well, but who's to say the Ravens wouldn't, I don't know, think about taking Ryan Tannehill in return, especially if the Titans are willing to pick up some of the money on that. But it's like they're already going to be paying Lamar, and it essentially would, I think, would matter like what the trade return would be. Like that would have to be worked out. But the thing is, if Lamar doesn't play quarterback for the Ravens this year, who does? Like, let's look at this from a Ravens perspective, because honestly, like I think best case scenario for them is they're able to make a trade and they're able to put themselves in a position to grab one of these best quarterbacks from this year.
Right. I would go on the other side. I think they would go in-house too. I think they would consider Tyler Huntley.
Well, that would have to be the first option just because he's already there.
He has played a decent amount of games, so they kind of know what he's like.
But he also is kind of the reason they lost that playoff game last year. So it's kind of tough to be like.
It's funny because he's a similar player to Lamar.
He's not. He's nowhere near Lamar though. He might have be similar,
same playing style,
traits. Yeah, playing style. That's a good way. But their skill is nowhere, I think, on the same level.
No, definitely not. But I don't know. Maybe they give him a shot. I feel like they have a decent enough roster where I don't know if certain things go right, they could still be a wild card team.
Yeah,
I mean the Bengals are the class of that division. The Browns you think would be in the mix, and then you have the Steelers, and they're kind of a wild card. But I don't know. I really don't know who else is out there. I mean, do they swing a trade in the draft and they move up a bunch of slots and they get a QB, one of the QBs that's up there at the top? I don't know. Probably not. Yeah, I just don't know where Lamar's going to go. And then if he does leave, who's the Ravens QB?
And I think the one other team, too, that he's been connected to, but I can't really see him going there just because they've picked up Tua's fifth-year option, would be the Dolphins. Just because he's from South Florida, and I think he would be really good in that offense, especially with the way that Mike McDaniel has improved a quarterback in year one. Like I could see him doing numbers for Lamar. I could see there being a big step there for Lamar, and I could see the Dolphins being really successful. But the question would then come down to cap space because you would be paying Lamar $7 million more than you would be paying Tua.
Yeah, it's a big upgrade.
Yeah, and at the same time, too, you're gonna have to probably make it a long-term commitment, which is gonna screw up your cap in other ways too.
Yeah, I'm envisioning that right now. Lamar to the Dolphins. You put him and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the same side of the ball on the field. Ooh.
They would have absolutely electric offense, but there's a lot of, I think, question marks more than answers here in this Lamar situation. And honestly, I'll say this: I think it's fair for Lamar to have this kind of waiting period because he should feel that he wants to be paid an amount that's similar to Deshaun Watson, right?
I think so. I think
that's acceptable to think if you're Lamar. But at the same time, I also think it's fair for the Ravens to be like, oh, you know what? We have some concerns about Lamar due to injury, due to maybe the fact that we're not sure how many other teams really want him. Because like we said, there are other teams who have came out and said they're not interested. And that kind of creates the problem of, okay, if Lamar wants out of the Ravens, but then really not that many other teams want him, then what happens? Lamar's hand is basically forced at this point, and everyone knows that he would be unhappy in Baltimore and he would have no choice but to stay there. But I think the key is really like some of those teams near the top, like the Colts.
Yeah, I agree. And then I actually just got a notification from Ian Rappaport. It said that Lamar and the Ravens are still talking to each other. They're still trying to negotiate despite all this, but I don't know. You could take that with a grain of salt.
No, I mean, I could still 100% see him signing a deal, staying with the Ravens, getting it all worked out. Just because, from the Ravens' perspective, they have a nice defense, and I think losing Lamar would set them back. It really would. I think it would set them back a lot.
Yeah, I think so. They go from probably a playoff team to I don't know, not being all the way at the bottom of the lottery, but maybe I don't know.
I mean, their defense really came on last year, and it was unfortunate because when their defense played the best was when Lamar wasn't on the field. And early in the season, when Lamar was peaking, that was when the defense wasn't good because they had those second half collapses.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be answered, like you said. A lot of questions, and definitely more questions than answers.
Certainly. All right, let's move on to some March Madness now, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. So we had the Elite Eight over the weekend, and we have the Final Four set now, and had a very interesting slate of games. And I think starting with FAU and Kansas State on Saturday, that was a great back and forth battle. FAU ended up pulling away 79-76, and the storyline going in was, could FAU keep the run going in? Short answer is yes, they won, and now they're in the Final Four. And the other side was, does Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson keep Kansas State's run going? And Noel, to his part, he had 30 points and 12 assists, but just wasn't enough. He just didn't really get a lot of help. I mean, he had 14 points from Naquan Tomlin, but that was really it. FAU was just, I thought, establishing themselves early, especially down low with their center. I think his name is Vladislav Golden.
Oh yeah, they killed them on the board.
He was feasting down
It was
low.
not even close.
It's 13 boards.
Well, FAU as a team doubled the amount of rebounds that Kansas State had.
Right.
So-
Kansas State didn't have more than 6 rebounds from one player.
And that's just not gonna, again, it's the little things. We always say that on this show. It's the little things like free throws. Who made more free throws? Well, no surprise here. Florida Atlantic did. And then it's rebounds. Oh, who had more rebounds? Oh, well, Florida Atlantic had 22 more rebounds. The one area that Kansas State was better in was turnovers, but when you're giving up such a disadvantage on the boards, you're never going to be able to make up with that. And not to mention, too, I mean, Kansas State really wasn't that efficient shooting. So when you kind of,
Especially down the stretch.
yeah, they were really bad down the stretch.
They were taking some bad shots. I thought the same was in the first half. I think their first halves in the tournament were not great. They're just taking long threes, and then it would always be the same two guys shooting, Johnson and Noel, which is expected. I mean, they're the two best players on the team, but I don't know. You got to swing the rock a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for Florida Atlantic's sake, that's a huge win. Now they're the East Region champs, and they go into the Final Four, and they're going to be going up against San Diego State, who had that, I guess you could say, controversial win versus Creighton yesterday.
Yeah, definitely controversial for sure. I don't know. It's kind of a back and forth game throughout.
I mean,
Creighton came out and they probably looked a little better, but I don't know. San Diego State really turned it on, especially defensively.
Defensively
in the second half.
Yeah, defensively in the second half, they were outstanding, I thought. I mean, they allowed 23 points in the second half. And let's talk about that play where there ultimately was the foul that is a little bit of a controversy. In my opinion, he had his hand on him. He's coming into him in the air. I'm talking about the Creighton defender, that is. He's going into the San Diego State offensive player as he's shooting, and he's coming into him from behind. Like, he's going into him as this guy's facing the basket, and they're both kind of colliding into each other. They're always going to call it if you're running from up the court. You know what I mean? Just because it just always looks worse, and especially when you're going towards the basket. And it's also just a dumb foul to do because there was so much pressure. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think that shot was going in at all.
I don't think so either. And like you said, it's a bad look when you're trying to chase the defender down from behind. It seems like the defender's desperate. And I don't know if he gave him enough room to land either. I don't know. There's a lot of things there.
I mean, I thought it was a foul. Like, I do agree with the
I mean, there
call.
was enough contact there where I think it probably warranted the
You
call.
can't knock into a guy when he's in the air, right?
Yeah. You got to give the shooter space.
And in this case, they didn't, and they called the foul, and then that was ultimately why they lost.
And it was very dramatic too, because the San Diego State player actually missed the first free throw. So they were thinking, oh God, buckle up. We got to make this one. They did. He's on good. So yeah, props to the Aztecs. I mean, who would have thought that they would be getting out of this region?
No, I certainly
They
wouldn't.
kind of coasted to the Sweet 16, but then they had that tough matchup that everyone thought they would have against Bama. And it's funny, they were down most of that game, and then all of a sudden they just went on that massive run in the second half. And yeah, they won that game and won this game.
You know, San Diego State's been winning it with, I think, timely defense, especially in the second half. I mean, let's talk about the Creighton offense, though. Like, they were not on the level that they have been. I mean,
No.
2 of 17 from 3.
Yeah.
That is ugly. I mean, really, really ugly. I mean, that is awful.
And offense hasn't really been their issue in the tournament. They had 72 points in their first game. They exploded for 85 against Baylor. And I was watching that game. They looked locked in. And then they took care of business against Princeton and dispatched their defense for 86. So yeah, to see them kind of fall back to earth, it's definitely not good for Creighton. I thought they were just kind of, I don't know, depending on guys to do things, and then didn't really happen.
No, you're absolutely right. And when your offense isn't clicking, especially in the tournament, that kind of opens up the realm of possibilities for anything to happen. And with a team that's so good defensively, like San Diego State, when they really lock you up when you're not shooting well, they're going to be able to take advantage of that. And that's just what happened.
Yeah. And then this game earlier on Saturday night, this game was just not close at all. The UConn Gonzaga game, absolute blowout win for UConn. They won 82-54. And
that game was over as soon as Drew Timme picked up his 4th foul at the beginning of the second half.
Yeah. And at halftime, UConn's up 7, and you thought they were kind of in control, but not really in full control. Gonzaga was still kind of hanging around, but all of a sudden, Gonzaga's offense just scuffled in the second half, and UConn, they just looked like a wagon in the tournament. I mean, I think by far, among the 4 teams left, they're clearly the best team out there. Now, whether they win the whole thing, that's a different question, but I think from top to bottom, they're just so solid on both ends of the floor. And I think that was the difference. Gonzaga is an offensive juggernaut, but they just don't have the defense.
And once Drew Timme came out, and Drew Timme also did not have the game that he had previously against UCLA, that made it really difficult for Gonzaga.
Right. And he didn't really get a lot of help either. Strawther was the only other guy in double figures for Gonzaga. And then you have UConn on the other side, Jordan Hawkins, who's been outstanding in the tournament. He's just a shot maker. He had 6 threes and finished at 20 points. And then Sanogo only had 10 points, but he had 10 boards. And then Caravan had 12. So they had a lot of good contributions from their main players. And
just an overall
Yeah,
really ugly offensive performance from Gonzaga, especially when you combine the fact that they're not good at defense. I mean, they literally shot 2 of 20 from
yeah,
three.
the wheels just fell off the track really fast.
And then they also
It was
shot
disheartening.
2 of 22 at the free throw line. So 20 missed frees and 10 missed 3 throws. That's a rough day.
Yeah. And then the final game from the Elite Eight slate was the Miami Texas game, which was yesterday evening. And another shocker, Miami pulls off the upset. They took down Texas 88-81. And another game where in the first half, Texas is in control. They're up 8 at the break. They're looking pretty solid. And then slowly but surely, Miami finds a way to get stops. And I thought that was their key. They gave up 36 in the second half, but I thought they got many timely stops, especially in the latter part of that second half. And Isaiah Wong and company, they found a way to get it done. And their starting 5 was phenomenal. I thought everyone played really well. I thought O'Meara was really good down the stretch on both ends. Wong was making a few shots, but Jordan Miller was phenomenal with 27. I mean, he was kind of the guy that was carrying Miami. And they've kind of been a team that slept on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they played really good. I didn't even think there was really anything that Texas really did super wrong. I mean, they put up 81. It's just that their defense was not great, and especially in the second half, that was really where I felt like the troubles kind of started for them because they were up, right? They were up in this game, and at one point, I think they were up 10 in the second half. So a 10-point blown
with like
lead.
10 minutes left.
Yeah, like a 10-point blown lead is just not a good look. Now, I understand that Texas had a lot go wrong for them this season. They were dealing with some the coaching change. Chris Beard obviously being let go is really tough, and then they fought through injuries because Dessou also got hurt.
And he did not play yesterday,
Yeah,
so
and
that was a big
he
loss.
got hurt on was it Friday? And
Yes.
that was really a difficult loss for them. And at the end of the day, they just couldn't overcome it. And really, the Miami defense locking up as Miller and the offense from the Hurricanes got going, it was just too much for Texas. And once again, we have Miami in the Final Four. Look at this.
Yeah, I mean, we have two teams that are really close to each other, like you said, Miami and FAU. You have a team from the Northeast New England region in UConn, and you have a team all the way from the West Coast in San Diego State. So all sides of the country being represented in the Final Four,
Not the Midwest.
not the Midwest. And then the other thing for Texas too, they did promote Rodney Terry, who was their interim head coach. They promoted him to the head coaching position. So I think maybe next year going in with some continuity and knowing that he's the guy. Now, I don't know who they're losing. I don't know if Carr's leaving or Serge Rice is leaving, but I'm assuming they're going to have a pretty good team again. So
Yeah.
they'll probably be in the fold again.
Yeah, I would assume for them to at least be the fold in the Big 12, to say the least. Nationally, I mean, the last couple of years they've had some talent, so I wouldn't be surprised they're ranked once again. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest question becomes for Texas getting over the hump in the tournament, because it doesn't seem like whoever the coach is, it does not matter. The team just cannot get over the hump.
This year they were definitely closer than previous years, specifically under Shaka Smart.
But they were given a 31% chance.
Hello, welcome back to WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle with Jeffrey Bazzi and Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, now we're going to shift things back to the NFL like we did earlier in the show, and we have some news surrounding your Denver Broncos. And they announced that they are not going to trade Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, so there had been a lot of rumors that they were being shopped around, and I'm not really sure where those rumors were coming from, because all along it seemed like the closest reporters to the actual team, which are like the Denver reporters, kind of ruled out that Jeudy or Courtland Sutton would be traded. But in the national spotlight, it got like a lot more of publicity because Sutton was tweeting about it, and that obviously doesn't make it any better. But Sean Payton kind of put the rumors to bed and said that we're not going to be moving those players. And honestly, the way that I look at it is like, this is the ideal situation, right? Like Sean Payton's coming in. He is probably the best offensive coach the Broncos have had in at least my entire life. And he has the ability to use players in ways that other coaches don't and make them better. So I don't understand getting rid of Jerry Jeudy right before Sean Payton's about to walk through the door, because if he has a great season and you still want him gone, you can always trade him. But at the same time, if he's great, you can also just hold on to him and, oh, look at that, we have a wide receiver one. Same thing for Sutton too. I could see him taking a big jump under Sean Payton. I think this would be an ideal offense for him, especially because Sutton kind of seems to do better on the quick passing. Same for Jeudy. And I feel like that's kind of going to be what they're asking Russell to do, which is like the quick and easy stuff, as opposed to some of the more elaborate stuff that we were trying, or at least whoever was calling the plays. I don't know what the heck was going on there. But at the end of the day, I would expect there to be some offensive improvement. And I think it would be wrong to give up on these guys before they've had the chance to really shine under a good coach.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is they're still both relatively young. I mean, Judy's like 24.
Judy's 23 years old.
Yeah, and
that is
Sutton,
insane.
I think, is 27, and he's a little older, but he's still young.
And Jeudy is, at this point in time, not being paid very much.
No.
So I don't understand the rush to move him. Like, I never understood that at all.
Right, and I have it right here on my phone. They accounted for a lot of the Broncos passing core, obviously. I mean, Jeudy led the team with 67 catches. Sutton was not far behind with 64. And if you were going to take one of them away, I mean, you'd be missing probably a quarter of the passing offense.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that KJ Hamler just had surgery. So he would essentially, in my opinion, probably be wide receiver 4. But now his status for the beginning of the season, at least for the preseason, is up in the air. And then we still have Tim Patrick, who led us in touchdowns the year before, in touchdown receptions. And he's going to be coming back. I would assume, I thought there was a chance that he could be cut, but it looks like they're keeping him. And honestly, I think with those 3 receivers, I think that kind of gives us a chance to be better on offense, combining with that with Sean Payton's offensive scheme.
It's not a bad trio. I
No,
mean, those
it's
3 guys are not a
you
bad
can
trio.
certainly do worse. I would say we're better than a lot of other teams when you look at 3 receivers. I
And
mean,
then even Dulcich had 33 catches.
yeah, Dulcich is the guy that I'm definitely most excited for on the offense, just because we've seen so many good tight ends under Sean Payton, specifically like Jimmy Graham. But just in general, like it's just a good usage of them. They do a good job. And look at Ben Watson late in his career. He was able to keep it going just as like a red zone threat, which is a place where the Broncos struggle the most. So, but Dulcich has all the potential in the world because he's extremely athletic. So that's something I'm interested to see too. The only problem with Dulcich is he may actually be the worst blocking tight end I've seen in a while, like really, really bad. But because he's so athletic, put him out as a wide receiver, right? That would be kind of the best case scenario. But just in general, the youngness on the offense does excite me. And also combine that with Sean Payton coming in, making some moves on the O line. And you still have Russell Wilson as the biggest question mark. That's ultimately, I think, where this conversation is leading to. So, regardless of who's there, who's not, it comes down to Russell at the end of the day.
Yeah, but as far as the rumor went from Sutton and Judy potentially being traded, I just don't see why you would do it because say you get draft picks back, I mean, that sets you back a little bit. And I think Sutton and Judy, just at their age and what they've already done in their careers, I mean, they've both had probably decent careers so far. I mean, there's only room to grow, you would think. Right?
Yeah, well, Sutton's been hurt, so that's been the toughest part for him was he tore his ACL in 2020.
Yeah.
And last year I felt, or the last few years, I felt like he's kind of just been, last year was the first year I thought like he was 100% back because he has been on the team for kind of a while, actually. And whereas with Jerry Jeudy, I feel like it's just been potential that has never really hit. So I would, if one of the 2 got traded, I would have totally preferred to be Courtland Sutton, just because I feel like he's in the middle of his career. They know that he can be successful as an NFL receiver. However, I don't think that he was ever on the possible skill level of like Jerry Jeudy. But hey, I could be wrong. They could both have awesome years this year, and who knows? Sutton could have a way better year under Sean Payton too. Like I know this is like a terrible comparison to make, but this is just the way that I envision it. Michael Thomas is like a big receiver, ran a lot of slants, was able to use his big body to kind of position himself to have good catches. Well, Sutton kind of allows for the same thing to happen because he's a very big body. He's a lot faster than he actually gets credit for. He multiple weeks throughout the season, you can look on Amazon Web Services. He's amongst some of the fastest ball carriers for receivers, which is worth noting. That's pretty cool because it points out how much speed he does possibly have. And I don't know. I feel like a player with that size and that speed, let's give him a chance to grow.
Yeah, I don't think you would want to give that up right away.
Mhm.
I totally agree. So I think going forward, I think Sean Payton can definitely work with them.
Yeah. And there's some other interesting NFL news too. We have the San Francisco 49ers are open for a quarterback competition between Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, and the presumed leader in the clubhouse, not just according to us, but also to their GM, John Lynch, Brock Purdy.
Yeah, John Lynch, the 49ers GM, he came out and said today that Brock Purdy has, quote, earned the right to take the first snap in the QB battle. And like you said, it's definitely going to be a competition for the 49ers job. And it's so interesting to me just because the Niners are definitely one of the top teams in the NFL. And the fact that they don't really know who the QB1 is, it's kind of crazy to me because these other teams who are contenders, Mahomes is going to be there. Burrow's going to be there. Allen's going to be there. Hurts is going to be there. And there's other teams too. I mean, there's so many other teams who know who their quarterback is going into 2023, but the Niners are kind of in this weird spot where they have options. But I do think that
if you have 3 quarterbacks, do you really have any?
Yeah, that's another point that definitely should be brought up. But as far as what John Lynch said, saying that Purdy has earned the right, I agree. I do think he's earned the right. Now, I think there is a question of, well, does Trey Lance deserve another shot? Yeah, I think so. I mean, you spend number 2 pick on a guy, you clearly believe in him, and I know that it's unfortunate with the injury that he suffered last season and he didn't really play, but I don't know. I do agree with Purdy though. I think Purdy is the guy. Like if I had to pick one right now, no competition, I go with Purdy just because I'm going off of what I've seen. And he's a guy who came in and just won a lot of games and got to the NFC Championship. And he unfortunately got hurt in that game too. But I just like what I saw from Purdy. And I know for Lance, it was only half a game, but
A game and a
yeah,
half.
game and a half. That's what I meant.
Yeah, so for Brock Purdy's sake, I liked what he did last year, and I think he definitely does deserve to take that first snap. But at the same time, too, let's look at what the 49ers did to get Trey Lance. Like they made a huge trade. There's some value in that because think about it, they kind of gave up a lot to move up. Like they had a lot invested in Trey Lance. Now, if Brock Purdy's the guy and he ends up being this, great quarterback for them, then so be it. Like that's the answer. But I think it's interesting they brought in Sam Darnold
Yeah,
because
I don't know why they did that.
I think they could see both of them not playing well.
Or if one of them happens to get hurt again, I mean, maybe they're just worried that maybe these injuries could happen again.
Or if Trey Lance loses the quarterback battle, he might say, I'm out. I don't want to be here anymore. Trade me.
Yeah, I'm sure people would be calling the Niners in 2 seconds.
Yeah, I would imagine I would want the Broncos to potentially be looking, right?
In case Russell Wilson goes awry.
Or just because he's a young quarterback who's really had some misfortunes. And it seems like, injuries is
Or if you
really
put him in a new scenery.
Yeah, it just seems like injuries. Like realistically, like, does anyone know if Trey Lance is good or not? No, I have no idea. I can't tell you. He's
We
played a
don't
game
know.
and a half. I
Yeah.
have no idea.
I mean, it's one thing you can go off his college tape, but NFL tape.
But
No,
think
we
about
don't
it.
know.
His last year in college, he only played what, a few games, like
Yeah,
3 or
I was
something.
gonna say like 5.
I don't even know what it was. Like
It was a very small sample size.
yes. So he just hasn't played football. Like, kind of just needs a chance. Where this is where a spot where I could see a lot of teams being interested because there's so many teams where I think would take a chance on that, like the Bucks, right? Like they're looking for a quarterback. I could see them taking a chance. The Saints as like backup option, like, hey, I know they just got Carr, but at the same time, you're gonna have to, potentially think about life after Derek Carr because he is Derek Carr and he can only do so much. There's the Commanders I could see being interested. The Patriots I could see being interested. I think there's like the Ravens, if Lamar ultimately isn't the quarterback, I could see them being interested.
Maybe even after this year, there's probably gonna be more teams that open up for jobs as well in the QB market.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point as well. Who knows what the Vikings are thinking, right? Like they do have Kirk Cousins there, but he is getting a little older. Potentially could bring in maybe a younger quarterback and
Right.
look to
And there's
kind
also
of
other
transition.
teams too with some older veterans, and I don't know what they're gonna be feeling. Like I'm talking about the Seahawks, the Rams. Like I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point as
A lot of
well.
those teams with a lot of
But there would be a market for Trey Lance. And I think
I
they know
agree.
that. And I think the 49ers know that too. And I think they're not stupid to know that if things don't really go Trey Lance's way, he might want out and they're going to have to work on a potential trade for him. So Sam Darnold, I think, as the newcomer to this situation is just interesting because I think he does have a lot more value here than people think. And I'm also excited because you could make the case that this is going to be the best coaching that Sam Darnold has ever had.
I think so.
And it's interesting too, because why did they go after Darnold? Obviously, he was really highly rated coming out of college. He looked like he had a boatload of potential, and he showed it at times with the Jets, but ultimately it didn't work out long term, and they felt the need that they had to move on just because of the lack of winning games at the end of the day, what it was. But, in Carolina last year, he looked better.
He definitely showed some flashes.
He looked a lot better than he has in the past, particularly with the turnovers. I thought that was kind of like the biggest place of improvement for him and the decision making in general. I didn't feel like he really forced anything. I thought like he just did what he had to do. And in an offense like the 49ers, just doing what you need to do is how you have success. Look at what Brock Purdy did. He just did what he had to do most of the time. Garoppolo did what he had to do. Just make the quick, easy throws. And Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if at one point during the season Sam Darnold is a starter. Like I really wouldn't. I think he could actually succeed here, and I'm not by any means surprised or counting him out.
Yeah, whether Purdy's not back in time for week 1, or if he doesn't play well, or if Lance
Because this
doesn't
is a
play
team that's
well.
ready to win now too.
Yeah, I mean, they were 2 wins away from a Super Bowl title last season. I mean, they're right there. But as far as the competition goes, it's just so interesting because you look at Purdy, he's definitely played his way into the job because you saw last year he came in and it looked like they weren't even missing a beat. And he went on that long win streak. And like you said, he was just doing everything the offense asked him to do, make the quick, easy throws and kind of make the occasional deep throws when necessary. And then you look at Lance, and I'm going back to what we brought up earlier about how we haven't really seen him play. I feel like in his rookie year, he only came in for special package plays, and he was actually really good at those package plays, but we never really saw him be a starter that much. But obviously, he was injured last season, so that definitely hurt his chances for this competition. And then bringing in Darnold is interesting, and I think it could be viewed as an insurance policy. I also think that he could kind of revive himself even more in San Francisco. So if I'm picking one of the three, I'm probably taking Purdy just based on the track record. But yeah, I don't know. If something goes wrong, he obviously has to earn the job in training camp. That's the other thing. I mean, if one of these guys just completely outplays the other two, I mean, you got to give that person the job, right? Like if Darnold, for example, just outplays the hell out of Purdy and Lance. Now, I'm not saying that's likely, but if it does happen, I mean, you got to give him the job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a team that's designed to win now.
And he's kind of the wild card because he is the one that wasn't on the team last year. The other two are a little more familiar with what they're doing. And I know Lance didn't play, but he's been there for 2 years. So he kind of knows what the deal is.
Yeah, and it's also funny too because we kind of have like similar situations with Lance and Darnold. They were highly rated, highly drafted players when they first came out of college, but it really hasn't worked out for them so great so far. So they're almost doing like QB rehab over in San Francisco because could you imagine if they just like turned around Darnold's career somehow? I
I
mean, that
know
would
that
be
would be
insane.
crazy.
That would be insane. But also at the same time, too, Brock Purdy did look really good last year, and they did not lose a single game with him. So I feel like that's why he has to be the said leader in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I think so. I think we just got to sit back and wait and see because we can think one thing and then certain things can happen and it can change the whole thing. But before we close the show, I wanted to bring this up because we have baseball starting on Thursday. That's when MLB opening day is. And there was some news from the Yankees about Anthony Volpe making the team. Obviously, I'm sure you're pretty happy about that. What are your thoughts? Because you have expressed over the last few months that you don't want IKF as the starting shortstop, but now you're getting your wish with Anthony Volpe. So, what's your reaction to Volpe making the team?
Um, First of all, I'm excited and pumped that he made the team because I felt like he was the best player at shortstop. So I'm always excited when the best player, deservedly so, is on the field. Second of all, I'm pumped because I expect the Yankees to be stupid and not let him come up as the opening day shortstop. And despite the fact that he's a top prospect, and despite the fact that he had completely balled, we were still having this conversation, which I thought was ridiculous from the beginning. But wouldn't you know who was the one guy who didn't want Anthony Volpe on the roster? Oh, that's right. It's our dumb GM, Brian Cashman, who didn't want him. To say that that is surprising would be the most untrue thing ever. Of course, it was Brian Cashman who didn't want Anthony Volpe to come up. And that doesn't even make sense because the way the new CBA is, the service time doesn't matter. Like you're not getting anything extra out of keeping him down in AAA for a month. You're not. It's just stupid. Maybe if he needed more development, but the kid just showed after hitting for over 1,000 OPS last year in minor league ball, and then having an awesome spring against MLB talent.
Batting 314.
Yes, and also having another OPS of over 1,000. Like the kid just did nothing but play well. And I don't know how you could even look at that and be like, oh yeah, he should go down to AAA. Because also at the same time, if you look at who his competition was for shortstop, it's IKF, I can't field, who is a disaster. I don't need to see Aaron Hicks and IKF in Yankee uniforms anymore. I've run that course. At the same time, too, though, IKF does give us abilities in other spots because he can play multiple positions. So that's ultimately why he's still on the roster. Whereas Aaron Hicks, I just see no reason whatsoever. But back to Volpe here. He was going into that competition with IKF and Oswald Peraza. Or Oswaldo Peraza. Yes, Oswald Peraza. We have an Oswaldo Cabrera and then we have an Oswald Peraza. So with Peraza, who's also another young shortstop. So it almost became like you kind of had to choose between one of them because they're both prospects and they're both really young. And it's almost like whoever you pick, you're kind of committed to, right? Just because, well, you're not really committed to them if they don't play well, but you got to accept that whoever you bring up, if they don't play well and the other comes in and then starts playing really well, that the other guy's confidence is going to be killed. And it also might be really hard to get whoever that other person is back into the lineup just because they're so similar in age and they're both so highly regarded as, infield prospects. But I felt like Volpe, he played really good. And Peraza, too, at the same time, he hit 300 playing for the Yankees in September last year. Is it just really one really good month? I don't know, but it also should have been taken into consideration. And I do feel like it's tough for Peraza because he didn't really do anything wrong. It's just that Volpe played so much better, and it's just unfair for him. But at the end of the day, Volpe seems like he might be the better of the two, and he's our top prospect. You got to trust in what you scout. I mean, we took this guy in the first round out of high school. We gave him a lot of money, and the whole thing was he's our next shortstop. And now he's finally here, and I can't wait. He's from New Jersey too. He grew up a Yankee fan, so you can't really write it any better.
Dream come true.
Yes, that's essentially what it is. It's a dream come true, and for his sake, I'm just excited for him because it's just cool to see a young star who's literally the same age as us, or at least me. You're obviously a little bit older in terms of months, but for a week, me and this guy are still the same age, so it's still cool. But the point is, it's just nice to see another potential young star on my team, in addition to a team that already has Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton and Anthony Rizzo, and there's other good players on the team as well.
Yeah, I think also too, he's going to bolster the lineup, I would think. And the lineup's already pretty good. And I know there's some concerns with some players. Like I know Giancarlo Stanton's health is a question, but when he's in the lineup, he can be a power force, obviously.
Josh Donaldson.
We know what Judge is. Donaldson is like, I don't know.
He's the question mark.
He's like kind of like on a slow decline, but he might still have some left in the tank. We don't know. Like Gleyber Torres has been like pretty good over the years. It's just sometimes he can get really hot and really cold. Like I think there's a lot of good there, and I think Volpe's going to add another boost too. I think too is hopefully Harrison Bader's back soon because I feel like he could be another decent plug in the lineup. But
Jeff, I absolutely agree. I'd say the Bader injury.
I think the Volpe addition is going to be big because they need something to kind of inject some life into the lineup. Not saying they don't already have it, but I think they need more of it.
No, I absolutely agree. He does inject life into that lineup, and there's other players who do too, who I would like to see in there. And that one of them,
Rizzo could do it too.
Yeah, Rizzo's just a bona fide leader on the team. Like that's expected at this point that he's going to have to kind of have that role. But another young player I want to point out is a guy who was on the team last year, and that's Oswald Cabrera. So Cabrera last year had a okay year, but he showed a lot of ability to play a lot of different positions, but he had a really good spring. And he's another guy that I could see just like I want these young guys in there because I think you got to find a way to combine the young energy while you still have studs like Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Rizzo. You know what I mean? You're going to have to find a way to kind of put this team together because there's just some guys who don't work out there. Like Aaron Hicks and Josh Donaldson, they're just not cutting it. They're just not. And I'm excited because I see us turning the page and looking to actually improve as opposed to staying stagnant with veteran players. That's really the reason I'm most excited. But also, too, the injuries are the biggest concern for the Yankees. I mean, we already got them stacking up. I know you guys over in Philadelphia have the same problem, but it is just so annoying to have because, especially pitching-wise, Severino now hurt. We also have Frankie Montas, he's out. We also have Carlos Rodon, he's out. It is just not looking good. Although it was nice to see yesterday we had who's expected to be our fifth starter. His name is Bea. And I mean, I just didn't see this coming because he threw five scoreless innings or perfect innings yesterday. And I'm trying to find his 100% what his name is because I don't want to say it wrong here. But I feel bad here. I'm not getting. Oh, Brito. Brito was his name, not Bea. Brito. So I'm gonna have to remember that. But Brito, this guy is expected to be kind of a back end rotation guy for us, and he stepped up and pitched really well at the end of the spring. So hopefully he can fill in that role of the injuries. As for the Phillies, anything you want to add?
No, I'm just curious to see how we're gonna navigate the first part of the season with the injuries. And I know Hoskins is gone for the year, but I'm more so concerned with how we start the year because last year, despite getting all the way to the World Series, the start of the year was atrocious. And
Yeah, that Mets game was rough.
that was a
The
rough game.
bullpen was really rough.
Yeah, and then the bullpen finally turned it around. You saw Jose Alvarado and Seranthony Dominguez kind of coming in their own, but I'm curious to see how we start the year because Rob Thompson obviously picked up from where Joe Girardi left off around Memorial Day last year, and he kind of just took off from there. Now with a full season under his belt, there's probably more pressure. So curious how we start the year. We can't go 7 games under 500 again. I mean, you can't be like that on Memorial Day. I mean, there is some room to grow from there. I mean, you can bounce back, but I just hope there's more of a sense of urgency to come out of the gates firing. So we'll see. And the Phillies do play the Yankees next week, so be an early season test.
Yeah, no, that should be
There's
interesting.
definitely a lot of more storylines too with the MLB. We'll probably get into more of that on Friday.
Yeah, we'll definitely go a lot more into detail.
But it's exciting with every team playing each other now, the pitch clock rules and all the other rule changes. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited more than I have been in a while. So
I agree. I like what they're doing. They're trying to. I love the youth movement in the game too. I
that's
love
the one thing they've been lacking, and I think they're trying to fix it.
Yeah, and with all these new young players, because I felt like for a while the league was really a lot of older, predominantly players, and now it's not so anymore, and it's nice to see.
I definitely agree. So that'll do it for us on After the Whistle. Thank you as always for listening. We'll be back on Friday talking about March Madness, some baseball, and some more. So have a great week, and we will see you on Friday.